Thank you for that, Young Xiao. Thank you everyone for coming. It is a pleasure to be here twice. I love Pollux, not just because they're multilingual. Hola, Emilia. And I know that there's people here who probably should be in bed, so thank you for being here. For those of you who it's, I think, 3 in the morning. I'm going to read the piece that was published in Pollux's 3rd issue. That's a trilingual-ish piece. It's mostly in English, but it's actually one of the first poems I wrote for my debut collection, Cajoncito, which is available on Amazon. And it's called Paris mi-octobre. And originally when I wrote it, just a little bit of a backstory, I didn't think that it had much merit. In fact, I put it in a folder which is called Going Nowhere in my Google Drive. But then I came back to it and I realized that actually language-wise, it has a great deal of merit because, well, we'll talk about it afterwards perhaps. Paris mi-octobre. I stand, unsteady, before the room. À Paris, le mois d'octobre. What am I to teach them? How can I show them what it is to talk, to cut the thoughts down to word shapes and coax the heart, the tongue, into speaking? Conditionals, perhaps, the language of what could never be or what might have been. English is forgiving. It has no proper subjunctive, but it makes provisions for the unreal and allows the imaginary its own clauses. And this classroom I love, this stage, this castle, is a prison, is a desert, is a small, small box. The French have no word for kindness, which is very telling, I find. They also struggle with a thistle, a thorn, thirsty, and a thunderstorm. But Spanish has 3 words for love. The time for paseo is behind us. Le pont Birakiem, le Grand Palais. Les champs, le but, le marais. The French and their lisping will just have to wait. Now that I have only myself and my thoughts for company. I told you once. And it was in Spanish, creo yo. I can hardly remember, but I told you once. The heart was never designed to break. In English or in Paris. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That ending every time, it's like, lovely, lovely. Okay, so a question that I have for you is, your piece speaks to the differences in what can be articulated depending on the language that one is using. So does it seem to you that multilingual people reach into only what is possible in the language they are using at the moment? Or do you think that there is a larger sense of articulation available to multilingual people, even when they're not using multiple languages at once?
I would think ultimately, that's a brilliant question, by the way. I would think ultimately that learning a language to whatever extent, gaining whatever extent of command, being able to speak, basically to communicate or understand another language, changes fundamentally who we are as people. We are people, we are communicators. The most usual way is through words, but obviously there's, non-verbal communicators too, but as human beings, we communicate. It's part of who we are. And when the avenues for communication are widened, or, we communicate in one direction and suddenly we're able to communicate in a completely different direction, which is what I believe different languages do, then ultimately it changes who we are as a person, how we receive what we're being told and how we emit it. So even if myself as an English speaker, I picked up Spanish a few years ago. When I'm speaking Spanish, ultimately I will never be speaking and articulating, as you said, the same things as a native Spanish speaker who only speaks Spanish, or a Spanish speaker who also speaks Spanish and Taiwanese, for example, because I don't speak that language. Because ultimately as well, languages are not things that exist in themselves. They are constantly moving, constantly evolving. they are a reflection of society and of cultures. I always say that language, excuse me, is an ambassador of culture. And in fact, that poem speaks about it. The French have, I live in Paris. I think Hiba as well, you live in France, if I got that correctly. We totally have to meet up if you do. But the French have no word for kindness. And it's incredibly telling because the concept of kindness for the French does not exist. Of niceness and warmth for the sake of it, it doesn't. Sadly, the stereotype of the grumpy Frenchman is very accurate. Um, so a language represents culture, just like Spanish, as I said, has 3 words for love, has 7 words for describing physical beauty. It says a lot, speaks a lot about that culture. And even if it has nothing to do with what I'm trying to say at a specific point in time, ultimately and completely, all of that knowledge and all of that sort of inclination of the mind and the heart and the essence of exchanging information with a person will be influenced by that.
Mm.
I think there's no way that it can't be, which is why I encourage everybody. And in fact, if it interests anybody, I'm running a few workshops on multilingual writing. And one of the things I want to encourage people is you don't have to be bilingual or completely fluent in another language to, first of all, appreciate it. And secondly, include it in your work, because every language has something that it brings to the world and it brings to the reader and the writer that no other language will. I fear I might have gone off on a tangent there, but I hope that somewhere in there was the answer to the question.
No, that is so lovely. That is so lovely. Let us know about your workshops. We'll retweet them and whatnot. Um, so what I'm hearing you say is that language gets to like the core of like how you communicate with people in all sorts of ways, not just the literal words that you are using at any moment. And
Absolutely, and just sorry, I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, but just an example is since I've started speaking Spanish and Portuguese, which are romance and very romantic romance languages, not just in terms of love, but in terms of just the way they see life, the way I communicate in English has changed completely.
mm,
Since I've lived in Paris and picked up metropolitan French rather than the Mauritian French that I spoke before, my way of speaking English has also completely changed in certain contexts because it informs not just the way I speak, but who I am fundamentally as a person, I think.
right, right. And everybody in this Zoom, if you want to read more about Elizabeth and French and different types of French, that's in issue 1. You can check that out in issue 1. Thank you so much for your brilliant thoughts today, Elizabeth.
Thank you.
That is a wonderful, not tangent. I think everything you said was very, very relevant to everything.